He watched his best friend die, and for 25 years, he never told the world what he saw. Not the reporters, not the cameras, not even most of his own family. But now, at 71 years old, Ken Schrader has finally opened up, and what is revealed changes the way we understand the most devastating moment in NASCAR history. To understand why his silence mattered so much, you have to understand what he actually witnessed. February 18th, 2001, the Daytona 500, the biggest race in American motorsports. Ken Schrader wasn't just another driver on that track that day. He was Dale Earnhardt's closest friend in the garage, a man who had built his shop a few miles from Earnhardt's place near Moseville, North Carolina, who had raced against him, argued with him, and trusted him more than almost anyone else in the sport. They were the kind of friends who competed over everything, even things that didn't matter, who finished their race shops first, whose daughter got homesick on the Earnhardt family yacht until Dale himself pulled her onto his lap and talked her through it. That's the kind of bond we're talking about. Not two athletes who respected each other from a distance. Two families who were tangled together. On the final lap of the 2001 Daytona 500, Schrader was running right beside Earnhardt, boxed in with Sterling Marlin and Rusty Wallace, all of them fighting for position as Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. pulled away up front. It should have been a forgettable moment in a race somebody else was about to win. Then Earnhardt's car shot up the track and slammed into the wall at nearly 160 miles an hour. Schrader couldn't avoid him. His car clipped Earnhardt's passenger side as both of them slid down into the infield grass. Think about the timeline for a second, because this is where the story gets almost unbearable. Schrader wasn't a bystander who arrived after the fact. He was 3 feet away when it happened. His own car was still sliding when Earnhardt slammed into the wall. There was no gap, no delay, no moment where someone else absorbed the initial shock first. It landed on him immediately, before his own adrenaline from the impact had even settled. And this is where the story the world knows ends, and the story almost nobody knows begins. Schrader climbed out of his own wrecked car, uninjured, and ran straight to his friend. He pulled down the window net himself. He looked inside, and in that instant, before any doctor, before any paramedic, before Dale Earnhardt Jr. even knew something was wrong, Ken Schrader knew. He never said what he saw. Not that day. Not for years. All he would give reporters was this: he saw a friend in trouble, and it stayed with him. That's it. That's all the public ever got. And in the absence of an answer, people built their own. Message boards, forums, whispered theories about blood, about injuries, about a face frozen in a way that haunted him. For 2 decades, Ken Schrader let the world imagine the worst, because the truth was his to carry, not ours to consume. Why would a man stay quiet that long? Think about what happened in the minutes right after he pulled down that window net. He didn't collapse. He didn't sit down. He got up and walked toward victory lane, because his other job that day, the job nobody assigns you, the job you just inherit because you happen to be standing there, was to tell Michael Waltrip that the biggest win of his career had just become the worst day of his life. Schrader had promised Waltrip earlier that if he won, they'd celebrate together. Instead, he delivered the news that ended the celebration before it started. Then he had to face a camera. A reporter asked him about Earnhardt on live television, and Schrader, pale, shaking, hiding behind sunglasses, said he didn't know anything. He lied, not out of dishonesty, out of instinct, protection, shock. And that lie, that flicker of a broken man trying to hold it together on live TV, became one of the most quietly devastating pieces of footage in NASCAR history, even though almost nobody understood what they were actually watching in the moment. Then came the hardest conversation of all. His 11-year-old daughter, Dorothy, had spent a week on the Earnhardt family yacht the summer before. She adored Dale, and Ken Schrader had to be the one to tell her that the man who once held her in his lap until her homesickness passed was gone. You'd think a man who lived through all of that would want to talk about it, if only to relieve the weight. Instead, he did the opposite. For years, in interview after interview, documentary after documentary, Schrader gave hints, fragments, careful phrases that revealed almost nothing. Racing insiders noticed. Fans noticed. It became one of the sport's quiet, unresolved mysteries. What does Ken Schrader actually know, and why won't he say it? Everyone assumed silence meant suffering. That assumption wasn't wrong. But it wasn't the whole picture either. There's another layer to this that rarely gets talked about. While Schrader was carrying that weight privately, his career didn't pause to let him grieve. Weeks after the crash, he had to relocate his own shop. He made the difficult call to fire his crew chief. He kept climbing into a race car, week after week, at tracks all over the country, performing the ordinary rituals of a NASCAR season while quietly managing something no season prepares you for. His wife would later describe him as someone who stayed on cloud nine when he was racing well, almost as if speed itself was the only place he could outrun what he'd seen. That contradiction, a man thriving publicly while sealing off something privately, is easy to miss if you're only watching the results column. But it was always there, underneath every lap. Because here's the turn nobody saw coming. 25 years after the crash, in a wide-ranging interview marking the anniversary, Schrader finally sat down and talked, not just about the wreck, but about his entire career, his choices, his friendship with Earnhardt, and for the first time, he did it without being asked to relive the worst part. The interviewer made a deliberate choice not to press him on what he saw inside that car. And something remarkable happened. Schrader brought it up anyway, unprompted, on his own terms. He talked about the last lap, about getting tired of being boxing behind Earnhardt, about the exact move he was setting up to make when everything went wrong. He talked about walking over to the number 3 car afterward, saying simply that he already knew what the outcome would be before anyone confirmed it to him. It wasn't a dramatic revelation. It wasn't a shocking new detail about blood or injury. It was something quieter and, in a way, more powerful, a man finally describing his own memory in his own words, without flinching away from it, and without performing grief for an audience. That's the real story here. Not a secret finally spilled. A man finally at peace enough to speak plainly about the worst day of his life, on a day he chose, in words he chose. Think about what that took. This wasn't a man avoiding the subject out of shame. His wife once said it best, that he went to that car out of compassion, and maybe saw more than he ever wanted to, but that he also took comfort in knowing he may have been one of the last people Dale Earnhardt heard beside him. That's not a burden hidden out of fear. That's a burden carried out of love, protected for 25 years because some things aren't the audience's to have. They're the friends to keep. And that reframes everything we thought we knew about Ken Schrader's silence. We spent 2 decades treating it as a mystery to be solved, a secret to be extracted. It was never a puzzle. It was loyalty. It was a man refusing to turn his best friend's final moments into content, into a headline, into something strangers could dissect for entertainment, even while the entire sport and its fans kept asking him to. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has spoken about what he saw in Schrader's eyes that day at the infield care center, how one look told him everything he needed to know before any official word came. 25 years later, Schrader is still the man who knew first, and for most of that time, the man who said the least. Now, finally, in his 70s, with the anniversary behind him and the sport he loves still carrying Earnhardt's name in its bones, he's letting a little more light into that room he sealed off decades ago. Not because the pain is gone, because he decided, on his own terms, that it was time. Some stories don't end with an answer. They end with understanding why the answer was withheld in the first place. Ken Schrader didn't owe anyone the details of the worst moment of his life. What he gave instead, for 25 years, was restraint, and what is giving now is trust. What do you think finally made him open up after all these years? Let us know in the comments, and if stories like this hit you the way they hit us, subscribe for more true stories from the world of NASCAR, NHRA, and motorsports.